are by and large center-right conservative type thinkers. They just don't like politics. And they get grossed out by the stuff they see up here, and so they decide not to be a part of either party. And so the challenge is to be true to the principles that we got elected on, and at the same time have a message that appeals to Americans that are not necessarily that interested in politics or don't like it necessarily from day to day. And that's really what the struggle that we're having here is. Not just on the debt limit is just an example of it. The debt limit is a debate that we're having about how much government should spend every month. And they make it really fancy around here and really difficult, but it's pretty straightforward to explain. And here's what it is. The government spends $300 billion a month. The federal government spends $300 billion a month. Of the $300 billion that we spend, $180 billion come from money we collect in taxes, and $120 billion comes from money that we borrow. And that's way too much. Okay? So what the president wants and is asking for is the ability to continue to borrow $120 billion a month. And what we're basically saying is, look, we don't think we can continue to do that. We think that you should only be allowed to borrow $110 billion a month, or $105 billion a month. And you're going to have to find $10 or $15 billion a month to cut somewhere. That's what people all over America have done. And that's what we need to start doing. That's what this fight is about. And so their argument back is, well, you know what, maybe our budget should be $310 billion. Maybe we can, instead of collecting $180 billion in taxes, we can collect $190 billion in taxes by raising taxes on people. And our answer back is, well, that sounds good, except the only way you're going to collect taxes is by going after people that create jobs. And the people that create jobs, we already have 90% unemployment. And the people that create jobs have to pay more in taxes. They're not going to create more jobs. Because in fact, it may even cost us more jobs. That doesn't make a lot of sense to us. So that's the debate we're at right now. And the problem is that there's these grown-ups around the world called rating agencies that give governments credit ratings. You know, basically all of you, when you turn 18, is anybody 18 now? 18, 19, you start going to college, you'll start getting offers for a credit card. If you pay that credit card off every month, you can owe a bunch of money on a credit card. As long as you make your regular payments, you'll have a really good credit rating. That's what the United States has right now. We have a really good credit rating. That means that when we go borrow money, people lend it to us because they know they're going to get paid back. They're positive. That's why we're a AAA rating. But these agencies are now telling us, look guys, we know that you have a AAA rating, but we think you owe too much money, and we don't know how you're going to be able to pay us back in the future. So unless you show us that you have a real plan to show us how you're going to pay us back in the future, we're going to downgrade you from AAA to AA. And what that means is that our cost of borrowing will go up. Right now, we pay, when people lend you $1 to the American government, we pay them back very little in interest. Why does people put money and lend us money? Because that's the safest place in the world to put your money. If you make $10 million, you can put it into a real estate deal and make a lot of money, or you can lose it all. But what some people do with a lot of money is they buy a U.S. Treasury. They buy U.S. debt, because the U.S. always pays back. They're not going to get a lot. The safer an investment, the less money you get back. But you're going to get it back. Right now, the U.S. pays very little back to its creditors. We pay very low interest, and that means we pay very low interest in credit cards and home mortgages and everything. But if you get downgraded, once you're no longer a AAA, you're a AA, the people that lend you money are going to want to make more money off of you. They're going to say, look, you're not as safe as you used to be. And so in order for us to lend you money, we want a higher rate of return. We want a higher yield, they call it. We want a higher interest rate. And what that means is that all over America, it will get even more expensive to buy a house in the middle of a housing crisis. It will get more expensive for businesses to borrow money to expand in the middle of an economic unemployment crisis. So we can't let this government get downgraded. And they've told us very clearly, the only thing that will keep us from downgrading you is if you show us a real plan that shows how you are going to borrow at least $4 trillion less than you plan to borrow over the next 10 years. And that's what this fight is about. That's what this fight is about. And so it's important that we get something done. But it's important that what we do is not just a deal, it has to be a solution. And that's what we're fighting about up here, and that's what the noise is about. And that's really what the future of the Republican Party is about. It has to be about that singular message. It's what your generation is going to be defined. When I was your age and a little younger, as a teenager, the President of the United States was a guy named Ronald Reagan. I'm sure you know who that is. Who's an extraordinary figure in history. The reason why I'm a Republican, and the reason why I'm a conservative, is because of his leadership. It's easy 20 years later to look at Ronald Reagan and say, man, he's so popular, even the Democrats think he was great. 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. For those of us who were around, even as teenagers, Ronald Reagan was not universally loved. In fact, a lot of his opponents said he was crazy. He used to say the Soviet Union was evil. and that they were going to destroy you. You can't say that about them. You're going to start a war. He said, well, that's the truth. They are evil. You know what happened to the Soviet Union? By the end of that decade that he was president, it collapsed. And so did the entire communist empire they had tried to build. He said that the problem was that government was too big and taking too much money out of people's wallets. And he presided over some of the largest economic expansions in American history. Sadly, he didn't have a Congress that would cut spending. And so they grew the debt during the time that he was president. Ronald Reagan was a transformational figure, not because he gave good speeches or because of his family story. He was a transformational figure because he made policy changes that allowed America to come back after a terrible president, Jimmy Carter, had really diminished us. That's what we are again. I'm not sure that, there are a lot of Ronald Reagans walking around. Those are very rare. But the principles he stood are just as true today as they were back then. And I'd say to you that for your generation, that's really the chance that you have, is to ensure that that message is embraced. Look, if you want to live in a country where you pay a lot of taxes and in return the government guarantees you all kinds of things, a house, a job, access to a doctor, although you may have to wait a long time to see the doctor, all those sorts of things. If you just want to live in a country where you don't have to work very hard, you can retire at 55, there are a lot of places around the world that have that. You should move to one of those countries. But if you want to live in a country where it doesn't matter where you come from, where your parents are from, if you have a really good idea and you have talent and you're willing to work hard, you actually have a chance to make it. You actually have a chance to put your boss out of business by going out and opening up your own business and competing with them. You actually have a chance to invent something that doesn't even exist out of the dorm room of a college or the garage of your parents' home. If you want to live in a country, there's only one place on earth where you've been able to do that over and over again for the last 100 years, and that's this country. And if we stop being that, there won't be anywhere on earth where that's possible. So I submit to you that what you want is the safety of a big government. It's a false safety, by the way, because in return you have to give up your liberties. There are a bunch of countries around the world that will offer you that. But if you want to live in a place where anything is possible, that should still be us. And it's only going to continue to be us if we fight for these principles that we believe in. I think that's really the great cause of your generation. That's what you're going to be fighting about for the next 20 years. This issue that we're facing isn't going to get solved next week in the debt limit vote. It's much bigger than that. And unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people in your generation, especially now when they go to college, that are going to be told, they're going to be given all these wonderful ideas about the great things government can do for people from their professors. And that's really the problem. A lot of these professors are in this administration, and they still can't figure out why these wonderful ideas that they used to lecture about don't really work in the real world. They're still scratching their head. How come the $800 billion that we wasted in the stimulus package didn't create a bunch of jobs? Some of them have concluded, well, because it wasn't enough, it should have been 1.6 billion. 1.6 trillion instead of 800 billion. You've got to fight against that. Your generation has to be the center-right generation. This is not about ideology anymore. It's about truth. It's about what works and what doesn't. And if we embrace that, you have a chance to truly create in the 21st century a country greater than the one we've known in the 20th. And that's really hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine how is it possible that the United States could be better over the next 100 years than they were over the last 100 years. And I'm telling you it is. Because the whole world is coming our way. The entire planet is opening up to the principles that we've embraced. If you think about it, in China, there are people that have lived in poverty for 10 generations that all of a sudden can afford to buy a car, or an iPhone, or access the internet. And not freely, but my point is all over the world, more people than ever can afford to buy the things that Americans invent and build. And that's our chance. That's really our opportunity. I said this in my maiden speech. Reagan talked about America as a shining city on the hill. But people get that wrong. He didn't want America to be the only shining city on the hill. He wanted America to serve as an inspiration to other people to build one of their own. He wanted other countries to become like us, prosperous and free, so that people in their own countries can be what they wanted to be instead of having to come here. Not that we didn't welcome them. But the truth is that most people would love to be able to stay in the country of their birth, if only it gave them the opportunities that America gave. And that's the future that Reagan thought America could help create for the world. And that's the opportunity of the 21st century. That'll be the chance that your generation will have if we don't blow it for you.